Monads are also something like that. They reflect every monad reflects every other monad except itself. And these are windowless. Why are they called windowless? Because according to Leibniz, no transactions happen between two monads. He says that whatever happens in other monads, it is instantaneously reflected inside other monad as well, given the way these monads are arranged at the beginning of universe. The way God has created this universe, He has created them in such a way that all of them are in sync. He gives an analogy that suppose there is a room full of clocks and all these clocks are set exactly to the same time, and all these clocks tick exactly in the same way, and all of them show the same time every time. It is exactly in that way. Now, one who doesn't know how clocks may work may say that one clock is causing the other clock to move in such a way. But that is not really true. Every clock is ticking on its own independently, and there is no kind of causal relation between one clock and the other. Though one may feel that there is a causal relation because of one's own ignorance. So Leibniz also says that the world is also like that. Every monad is on its own. Every monad is for itself. No monad influences the other. But the entire universe is constituted in every single monad. It is in that way that all other monads are also reflected in this monad. So, when something happens in the other monad, automatically, because this monad is set like that in the beginning of the universe itself, it also reflects what is happening in other monads. That does not mean that other monad is influencing it. It is just that it is set like that in the beginning. So every monad is windowless, nothing goes out or nothing comes in. And the entire world of monads is in sync. That's what he says. So it's a very counterintuitive theory. It's difficult to intuit it, it's difficult to believe. Like, I believe that I am pushing this table and this table is moving because I am pushing. So Leibniz would explain that the table is not moving because you are pushing it. You as a monad are performing what you are supposed to do at this moment of time, and the table is doing what it's supposed to do at that moment of time. It is moving, it is written, it is programmed in the monad called table that it's supposed to move away in that direction at this point of time, and it is also programmed in you that you are supposed to push or you are supposed to move your hand in this direction at this point of time. And since these both are syncing at the same time, you are getting a feeling, you are constructing in your mind that that is caused by you. The table's motion is caused by you. So he has sort of done away with the idea of causation itself, or at least causation across monads, but there is a kind of an internal causation that the previous stage causes the next stage. So he has brought in the entire universe into one single monad, and every monad reflects the entire universe. It's an extraordinary theory and very counterintuitive, but he defended it so well. And there are almost infinite number of monads. There is not one single monad. So the entire universe is constituted of only one type of thing called monads, but there is not one of them, there are many of them. So that's what this theory says. Okay, it's a very interesting theory. And then Thales, this person is considered to be the founder of Western philosophy. He is considered to be the first philosopher known in written history. See, whenever we say the first someone in anything, first philosopher, first scientist, first historian, or first anthropologist, whoever it is, it only means that that person is the first in the known history. There is something called prehistory. Prehistory is that point of time which is before we started documenting, before the time period which was documented at all in any point of time. Different regions can have different prehistories. Like a particular region's history could have started from 5000 BC. What happened before 5000 BC we don't know. Some other region's history could have started from 2000 BC. So whatever is documented, whatever point of time has been documented, the first point of time which was documented, only from there the history begins for that region. Whatever happened before that is prehistory. It is not documented. It is not part of the documented history. One can move that boundary further and further, but till then it's still part of prehistory. So it does not mean that there were no philosophers before Thales, or there were no people who thought of reality the way he did, or who did ponder on these questions. No, it was not like that. It only means that Thales was the first person known in the documented history to have thought of something like arche. That's all. So Thales, he thought of an arche which is translated as water, but we still don't know whether it is just the water which we see or a different kind of water. But he is the first one to have thought of some idea where this complex world with variety of things around us has come about one single thing. All these things are constituted of one single thing, and that may be water. This thought itself is very significant for humanity. To think of something like arche, to think that entire complexity of the things around us can be reduced or can be understood in terms of one or more finite number of things, that is a significant leap, a significant jump in the human thought itself. That's why Thales becomes important. So he believed that water is the arche, but there is no one single thing as such. I mean, one can find many instances of water in many forms across the world. So that's the sense. In that sense, he was qualitative monist but quantitative pluralist. Okay? So Thales was the first one who thought like that. That's a very significant thing. Okay, so we have seen so far the first class of people who were qualitative monists but quantitative pluralists. Now we will see some people who were both qualitative as well as quantitative monists. That is, they believed that the entire world, the entire universe has come about, has come from, or is constituted of one arche. Not one type of arche, but only one arche, one single arche. The first one in the list is Anaximander, who was actually Thales' student. He was also a Greek philosopher. And he believed that there is something called apeiron. Apeiron means indefinite or unlimited or boundless. In Sanskrit, the closest word is the cognate term is aparimit. Parimit is that which is limited. Aparimit is limitless. He believed that there is an arche. There is a fundamental thing or entity or some fabric in this universe which is unlimited and boundless, out of which all these limited things, all these bounded things have come to us. Like the things which we see around us, the material things, they have spatial boundaries, our thoughts have temporal boundaries, and everything has some or other kind of boundary. And he felt that the one thing out of which everything else has come should not have any boundaries of its own. Why? He said that all the things which we see in this world, they have opposites, like hot, cold, day, night, light, dark, all these things. And he believed that none of these things, none of these limited things could have been arche, because a limited thing or any of these things cannot give rise to its opposite. Light cannot give rise to dark, hot cannot give rise to cold, day cannot give rise to night. So there has to be some other origin out of which all these opposites have come about, because one one of the opposites cannot give rise to the other opposite, its opposite. So there has to be a common origin or a common ancestor for all these things, and that ancestor is apparent. So that's what he said, and it itself shouldn't have an origin. It itself shouldn't have a limit. So this is another significant step in Greek tradition, because Anaximander was the first one to think of the infinite, again in documented history. He was the first one to think of the limitless or the indefinite. Till then, Greek philosophers as well as Greek mathematicians couldn't handle the concept of infinity. They couldn't handle the concept of irrationals. They always believed that every number is a rational number, every number can be ratioed with 1. Rational means that which can be ratioed with some other number. And they believed in only whole numbers, and they can be ratioed with 1. Any number which can be ratioed with 1, which is a multiple of 1, is a rational number, a whole number. They believed in fractions, not fractions as such. They believed in ratioing numbers, and they believed in comparing to numbers. That much only is what they dealt with fractions. They didn't believe in decimal numbers or irrational numbers. So when you get into the domain of infinite or indefinite or irrational, it becomes very murky. But Anaximander was the first one who thought of an apparatum, who thought of an arche which is indefinite, which is infinite, which is limitless. Even that thought is something extraordinary. And another thing, another significant contribution of this thought is that to think of an arche which is not within the visible perceptible realm, but it is something in some other realm, it is something in imperceptible or an abstract realm. To think of all these material perceptible things have come about from something invisible or imperceptible thing. Even the thought is again a huge jump in the history of humanity. So these are not normal things. To think like this is not normal, it's not easy. It's like thinking out of the box. So these are extraordinary things. And I forgot mentioning to you just a small thing, that arche is the term from which we get the modern terms like architecture, archaeology, archetypes, etc. So arche, it's easy to understand the meaning of arche, that it is the fundamental base out of which everything else has come. Okay? So after Anaximander, his student Anaximenes. So Anaximander was Thales' student and Anaximenes was Anaximander's student. And Anaximenes has proposed another arche called air. Now it may seem that this is like going back to square one. Thales said water, Anaximenes said air. That's it. What is the difference between Thales and Anaximenes except he replaced one element with other element? Oh, no, that's not the point. Anaximenes' significant contribution was to imagine. Why did he say air in the first place? Let me explain that first. He said that everything is a transformation of an element called air. If you condense air, it becomes fire. If you condense fire, it becomes if you rarefy air, it becomes fire. If you condense air, it becomes water. And if you condense water further, it becomes earth. That's what he said. So he said that everything is a form of air itself. Just by rarefying or condensing air, you get all other elements. You get this entire universe itself. You get this entire, everything you see around you. So everything is nothing but air. So it is not types of airs, or it is not one type and many instances of air. Everything is air alone. Now what is the significance of this? This says that this is like the precursor to the modern scientific law of conservation of energy or the conservation of momentum. One can transform itself to the other. without losing its essence. So the idea that one can be transformed to the other without losing anything, that seed is in this thought. But what Thales said, he didn't say everything is a form of water. He said everything is constituted of water. Everything has come out of water. So there is a huge difference between what Thales said and what Anaximenes said. So the law of transformation, while conserving its essence, that thought, the seed, can be found in Anaximenes. So that's the fundamental difference between Anaximenes' contribution and Thales' contribution. Okay? And then we have someone called Parmenides, who was later than Anaximenes, a little later. He was also a Greek philosopher who said something very interesting and very controversial and very paradoxical. Some of you might have heard of Zeno's paradoxes, like the Achilles and tortoise paradox, where, or the rabbit and tortoise paradox, where the rabbit and the tortoise were in a race. Initially, the rabbit was so much ahead that it felt the tortoise could never reach it. So even before it finishes the race, it goes under a tree and starts taking rest. Meanwhile, the tortoise passes the rabbit and it goes a little ahead. Now, the tortoise didn't finish the race yet. The tortoise didn't cross the finish line yet. So the rabbit starts the race again. It resumes the race again, but it is never able to reach the tortoise now, because for every step the rabbit takes, no matter how big it is, the tortoise also takes a small step, little ahead. As long as there is a gap between the two, no matter how much the rabbit moves forward, the tortoise also moves a little forward. The rabbit moves forward, the tortoise also moves a little forward. So the gap between them is never bridged. And it seems to take infinite steps for the tortoise to reach the rabbit, and it never reaches for the rabbit to reach the tortoise, and it never reaches the tortoise, and finally the tortoise wins the race. This is the paradox. Another way to put this paradox is, if I have to go from point A to point B, first I have to cover half of it. But before I go to the half point or the midpoint, I have to cover half of it. Before I cover this point, I have to cover half of it. Before that, half of it, half of it, half of it, and so on. I should take infinite time. I would take infinite time to go to the next point itself, because between every 2 points there are infinite points according to the idea of continuum, or the idea of a continuous line. So I can never go to the next point because there is no next point. Between every 2 points there are infinite points, and half and half and half and half, and this goes on infinitely. So there is an infinite regress. So I can never move at all. So motion is impossible. So Zeno was the one who suggested such paradoxes to say that motion is impossible, to say that change is impossible. And he was Parmenides' student. Parmenides also said that change is impossible, and he said that there are not many, there is only one, and that one is the being. There is only one in the sense, there are not many things in this universe at all. I am seeing many chairs in front of me, I am seeing many people in front of me, but none of that matters. There is only one thing, the being in this universe, and that's it. And there is no change, it is unchanging. It is finite, it is unchanging, and it is only one. That's Parmenides' theory. But then, my experience is saying there are many things, and my experience is saying there is change in the world. How can you deny that? Parmenides simply denies it with reason. And Zeno puts it very elegantly. He says that if change is possible, then how come this paradox is possible? That I have to cover midpoint before I go to some point, and I have to cover midpoint of that midpoint, and midpoint of that midpoint of that midpoint, and so on. And this goes on infinitely, so I can never go to the next point because there are infinite points in between. I can never put a step, I can never move an inch. So motion is impossible. So what we are seeing is actually an illusion. What we are experiencing as change is only an illusion. Or also, what we are experiencing as many is only an illusion. The real is only one, and the real is unchanging. And that real is the being. It's an extraordinary thing. In fact, Parmenides was the first one. He can be considered the first rationalist. Rationalist in the sense, one who gives more importance to his reason over his experience. One who prioritizes his reason over his experience. So if the reason says something and the experience says the opposite, he would go with reason. My reason is saying there is no change, so there is no change. Though my experience is saying there is change. My reason is saying there is only one, so there is only one. There are not many. Though my experience is saying there are many. So Parmenides was the first rationalist, and also he was the first one to have applied the proof called proof by contradiction. We all know proof by contradiction, right? Like I assume something and I arrive at a contradiction, then I conclude that I arrived at this contradiction because of my starting point itself, because of my basic assumption itself. So my assumption is wrong. Hence, it is proved that my assumption is wrong. So, you prove something by assuming the opposite and then reaching a contradiction and then concluding that the opposite of the opposite is true. Hence, my starting point is true. So Parmenides was the first one to have applied that, and this is evident in Zeno's paradoxes that if I am able to move, I should have covered infinite steps, but I cannot cover infinite steps, or I would take infinite time, but I cannot take infinite time, so I cannot move. Hence, my initial assumption that I can move is wrong, hence I cannot move. It's like that. So he was the first rationalist, and this thought is again mind-boggling. It's a very tough thought to think of. And after Parmenides, we have Advait. Advait school was by the famous R. Shankaracharya. This is, he was around 8th century AD. He lived around 8th century AD. And he proposed something called Advait, which basically means no two, na dvaita. No two things, and there is only one. And that one, he refers to as Brahman. Actually, Advaita is not invented by him, it's only a systematization of a thought which was already existing in Upanishads, Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita. And this is a school which was a commentary on these three texts. These three texts are actually called Prasthanatrayi in Indian tradition: Upanishads, Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita. These three texts, this Prasthanatrayi, various commentaries were written on them, and out of these various commentaries, various schools have come. One of the schools is Shankaracharya's Advaita, which basically says that there is only one in the universe. All the other things which we see, the multitude, as well as the change, all these which we see is an illusion. Now one may say this is very similar to Parmenides, the being, and Advaita and Parmenides theories are identical, but no, there are many differences. One is that according to Parmenides, the being is finite, but Brahman is not finite according to Shankaracharya. And also, Brahman is Satchidananda Swarup. Brahman is a conscious being. Parmenides doesn't say anything like that exactly. It's still difficult to interpret or decode Parmenides because only fragments of his work are available. And one of his poems is available where he mentions this being, where he proposes the theory of this being, but that poem is very aphoristic and very metaphorical. So it's difficult to decode it. And also, according to Shankaracharya, it's not that he just says that this world is unreal and only Brahman is real. He actually also explains how this world has come about from the so-called Brahman. It's a huge theory and very complex and very rigorously developed. every step is explained, and they actually explain how we see this multitude and change in this world because of something called Maya. And he says how Maya comes from Brahman. So all these things are well laid out in Advaita. But even if Parmenides did that, such a kind of rigorous, elaborate justification or explanation for how this world, which is so diverse and multitudinous, has come about from a being which is unique or which is single, which is the one, and which is unchanging. Even if he did explain it somewhere, that is not available to us till today. So we can only speculate what he exactly said. And later there was Spinoza. He was a modern thinker who proposed something called pantheism. Pantheism is that everything is God. He equated nature with God. He said that God is nothing but this nature. There is no supernatural entity. This nature itself speaks to us in various ways. So God is this nature itself, and there is only one. And this fundamental nature itself is the ark. That is God. There is no other entity out of which everything else has come. It is only out of God that everything has come. Or it is only out of nature that everything has come. It is nature producing nature, nothing else. Everything is God. Everything is nature. So he equated both the things, and he said matter and mind are two facets of this nature, are two facets of this God, nothing else. So his theory is called pantheism, that everything is God. Okay? So these are all the theories, these are monist theories, where some say that there is only one type of arche, but many instances of such an arche, while some say that there is not only one type, but only one arche. There are no two arches of the same type. Then we have people who are dualists, those who said that there is not one thing, one arche, but there are fundamentally two arches, two types, or two in number. Two in number or two types. Now, I'm not getting into that much of detail, but basically giving you some examples of the range of thought that has gone into thinking about reality and the range of theories people have proposed, particularly with respect to arche itself. How many varieties of thoughts have come about and how many varieties of theories have been developed, and entire schools have been built on each of these theories or each of these fundamental difference of what arche is. That is the thing. So, so the first one is Descartes, who we all know very well for his Cartesian geometry or coordinate geometry. Most of us know him only as a mathematician, but he was also a philosopher, not any normal philosopher. He is considered to be the father of modern philosophy because of his significant contribution of the split between mind and matter, the famous mind-matter dichotomy, where he actually says that mind and matter are fundamentally two different substances and one cannot be reduced to the other or one cannot be derived from the other. Why? Because they are composed of fundamentally different properties and opposite properties. Like matter is extended, mind is unextended, matter is divisible, mind is indivisible. So he said that matter has completely different properties and mind has completely different properties, and one cannot be reduced to the other, or one cannot be composed of the other, or one cannot be derived from the other. So they are two different things, and this world is constituted of these two different things. That's it. That's what he said. And though he himself